You finally have a free hour, the laptop is closed, the house is quiet. But instead of sitting down, you suddenly find yourself furiously reorganizing the spice rack. And even though you're getting things done, there's this tight knot in your chest that just won't let you stop.
Yeah, the physical body is moving, but the mind is just running away. I mean, it looks like productivity to anyone watching. You might even be telling yourself it is productivity.
Right.
But underneath, there is this subtle humming tension. Stillness suddenly feels dangerous. You are doing more, but somehow you're actually feeling less.
We have all been there. And the crazy thing is, in that exact moment, you genuinely believe the spice rack is the most urgent thing in the world.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like life or death.
But chemically, biologically, something completely different is happening. So today on our deep dive, we're looking at this fascinating stack of sources, some clinical psychology papers, a framework called the arousal appraisal model, and some sociological studies on hustle culture.
Because we really need to figure out why we do this to ourselves.
Exactly. We're looking at this deep human impulse to basically outrun our own internal silence.
And it is such a powerful impulse. I mean, we're looking at a fundamental mechanism of how human beings process or, actively avoid processing their own internal world.
Yeah, it's so pervasive that we often don't even realize we're doing it until we are completely and utterly exhausted.
Right, because the weight of constant motion is something that society actually really encourages.
It totally does. We fill every single void in the day with a task. Like, we answer an email while we're making coffee.
Or we listen to an audiobook at double speed while folding the laundry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or squeeze in a phone call on the commute.
Yeah.
And we label all of this efficiency. But reading through these sources, I'm really starting to think efficiency is just a very polite word for a coping mechanism.
It often is. I mean, if we look at the emotional truth beneath that constant multitasking, this isn't really about time management at all, not at its core. It's about what happens when the noise stops. Think about what actually happens when you just sit on the couch in a quiet room and do absolutely nothing.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
Exactly. Because all those unresolved emotions, the background stress about money, the quiet loneliness you've been ignoring, maybe a lingering fear of inadequacy at your job, they suddenly demand your attention.
Right, because when the external noise drops, the internal noise basically steps into the spotlight.
That's a great way to put it. Yes.
I've always thought of it like trying to hold a giant beach ball underwater.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like as long as you're actively pushing it down,
Yeah.
staying busy, moving, doing things, you feel like you're in control of the ball.
Right, you're managing it.
But the second your arms get tired, it just explodes to the surface. But reading through these clinical papers we have today, I realized that metaphor only captures what it feels like.
Yeah, it's a feeling, not the mechanics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't explain the mechanism. It doesn't explain why holding the ball down actually makes us feel so physically terrible over time.
Right, because the beach ball kind of implies that the emotion is this foreign object you're just trying to keep away from yourself.
Right. Like it's outside of me.
But the reality is that the emotion is being generated by your own nervous system. You are generating the energy, and then you're generating the resistance to that energy.
Oh, wow. So we're fighting ourselves.
Basically, yeah. So we create this illusion of safety and busyness. Staying constantly occupied provides this temporary escape from our own internal state.
But the problem is, it creates a dependency, doesn't it?
A huge dependency. Our minds quickly learn a very simple, very dangerous equation, which is basically busyness equals relief from difficult feelings.
If you value conversations like this, you can stay with us here. Because what we're really exploring today is how our own minds trick us into exhaustion just to keep us safe.
And when we look at the psychology literature, there's a very specific name for this exact pattern.
Okay, let's get into the terminology. What is it called?
In clinical psychology, this broad pattern is called experiential avoidance, or EA.
Experiential avoidance.
Okay, yeah. It's defined as any attempt to avoid thoughts, feelings, memories, physical sensations, or other internal experiences, even when doing so creates long-term harm.
Let me stop you right there because I really want to make sure I'm getting the nuance of this.
Sure.
Experiential avoidance isn't just avoiding a bad external situation, right? Like skipping a terrible holiday party or dodging a toxic boss. It's avoiding our internal reality.
Yeah, that is the crucial distinction, yes.
Like if I have to do my taxes and I avoid them, I'm not actually afraid of the paper forms or the software. I'm afraid of the feeling of being financially inadequate that the forms trigger inside of me.
Exactly. You are avoiding the internal experience of anxiety or shame or confusion.
That makes so much sense.
And experiential avoidance is maintained by a process that behaviorists call negative reinforcement.
Okay, negative reinforcement. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot.
It does, so let's be really precise here. Negative reinforcement isn't a punishment. People always confuse those two.
Right.
It means a behavior is reinforced, meaning it's made more likely to happen again because it removes a negative stimulus.
Oh, okay. Like taking an aspirin for a headache. The headache goes away, so you're more likely to take an aspirin the next time you get one.
Exactly. That's negative reinforcement. So when you sit down to do those taxes, you feel a massive spike of anxiety. That's the negative stimulus.
Right.
Then you suddenly remember the spice rack. You get up, you start alphabetizing the cumin and the coriander, and the anxiety about your finances just fades into the background.
Because I'm focused on the spices.
Yes,
Yeah.
you escaped the feeling. That short-term relief is the negative reinforcement. Your brain basically logs a victory.
Wow.
It says, organizing the kitchen saves us from pain. We must do this every single time we feel pain.
And because it worked in the short term, we're essentially training ourselves to run away from our own lives.
Precisely. Which brings us to the modern, socially sanctioned version of this whole thing.
Toxic productivity.
Yes, toxic productivity.
This is when doing more stops being healthy motivation and crosses the line into pure emotional avoidance. And it is incredibly insidious because, well, society throws a parade for it.
They really do.
If I drink every night to numb my feelings, people intervene. But if I work 80 hours a week to numb my feelings, I get a promotion and people call me a hustler.
Right. It hides in plain sight. We idolize the hustle, which makes it very difficult for an individual to recognize that their endless late nights aren't driven by ambition at all.
What are they driven by?
Fear. Pure fear. And researchers have identified a very specific subtype of this behavior that I think is fascinating. It's called productive procrastination.
Okay, we need to spend some time on this because this concept completely reframed my entire week when I read it.
It's a game changer.
I think we all know what classic procrastination looks like. You know, you have a hard task, so you sit on the couch, eat chips, and watch 4 hours in television.
Right. In behavioral terms, classic procrastination is substituting an adaptive behavior, something helpful, like doing your actual work with a maladaptive behavior, like zoning out in front of a screen.
Yeah, and you feel terrible while doing it, and everyone agrees it's not a good use of time.
Exactly. But productive procrastination is entirely different.
It's much sneakier.
Oh, it is the sneakiest. This is when we replace one adaptive behavior like studying for a difficult exam or writing a complex proposal or maybe having a hard emotional conversation with a partner
Right.
with another adaptive but significantly less important behavior.
This is deep cleaning the bathroom instead of writing the proposal.
Yes.
This is completely overhauling your entire digital file system instead of having that difficult conversation.
Yes. And the reason it is so dangerous is because it provides the ultimate alibi.
The alibi. Tell me more about that.
Unlike classic procrastination, productive procrastination feels safe because it looks exactly like work. You can tell yourself, and anyone who asks, I'm not wasting time, look at this pristine bathroom, look at these beautifully color-coded folders.
Right, look how productive I am.
But it's still avoidance. You are still running away from the emotional weight of the primary task.
Yeah, it's an elaborate disguise for fear. But, to really understand why our bodies generate this frantic energy, why we can't just peacefully ignore the work, why we have to furiously clean the bathroom, we have to look at the underlying neurobiology.
We do. We have to look under the hood.
Yeah, and the sources we're looking at today dive into this framework called the Arousal Appraisal Model, or AAM. And honestly, reading the science on this completely changed how I view my own stress.
It is a truly remarkable model. The AAM posits that emotion isn't just this random isolated feeling that happens to you.
Okay.
Emotion is actually one phase in a much broader, highly organized process of arousal regulation. It's essentially an energy management system.
An energy management system.
Yeah. And it all starts with a part of the brain called the amygdala.
Usually we just hear the amygdala called the brain's fear center. But these papers frame it differently, don't they?
They do. Modern effective neuroscience is really moving away from just calling it the fear center. The arousal appraisal model frames the amygdala as a relevance detector.
A relevance detector, okay.
Its job is to constantly scan the environment, and when it detects something personally important, it mobilizes physiological energy. It prepares the body to act.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, It's basically just the gas pedal.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't actually know if we are driving toward a friend we haven't seen in years or driving away from a physical threat.
Yeah.
It just provides the physiological gas.
That is a very, very helpful way to think about it. It just provides the gas. Now, the arousal appraisal model breaks down how we use that gas, that mobilized energy, into 4 distinct stages along a single regulatory axis.
Let's walk through them because I think this explains the entire cycle of toxic productivity.
Let's do it. So stage 1.
Stage 1.
The first stage is called low-load contemplation. In this stage, amygdala activation is subthreshold. The brain has detected something relevant, but the energy doesn't fully organize your body into action.
This feels like when you're lying in bed and you have just a passing thought. Like, I should probably reply to that email eventually, or I wonder how my retirement account is doing.
Exactly. It's just quiet curiosity.
The gas pedal is barely being touched. The engine is just idling quietly. It's not forcing you out of your chair.
Yes. Energy is present, but it's very loosely held. You experience it as an inclination or a mild awareness. Then we move to the second stage.
Okay, what's stage 2?
Stage 2 is matched load action. This is really the sweet spot of human experience.
The sweet spot.
Yeah. In this stage, the mobilization of energy perfectly matches your behavioral capacity. The task requires exactly the amount of energy your amygdala is providing.
Oh, this is flow.
Yes, this is flow state.
This is when you sit down to write or paint or code or build something, and 2 hours just vanish. You aren't really thinking about your feelings. You're just doing the thing.
Precisely. The challenge of the task and your skill level are in perfect alignment.
The car is in gear, and you are driving smoothly down the highway.
Exactly. The feedback loop between your brain's energy production and your body's physical output closes rapidly and efficiently.
But life is rarely that perfect.
Very rarely. Which brings us to the third stage.
Okay, brace yourself. Stage 3.
Stage 3 is excess load emotion. This happens when the amygdala's activation pushes way beyond your available behavioral capacity.
So it's generating too much gas.
Yes, it generates more energy than can be discharged through the behavior at hand.
Okay, let's slow down here. Are you saying that if my brain is overwhelmed by the anxiety of, say, a blank page, it's revving the engine of a sports car? But my behavior capacity, my literal ability to just type the words, is stuck in neutral?
That is exactly what is happening.
The engine is screaming, the car is shaking, but we aren't moving anywhere.
Yes, the energy is stranded, it has nowhere to go. Because it cannot be discharged through a productive physical action, that biological energy must be carried subjectively.
Carried subjectively. What does that feel like?
It is carried as a differentiated feeling. This is where we experience anger, anxiety, overwhelm, or that literal tight knot in the chest we talked about earlier.
Oh my God.
Emotion in this model is essentially surplus undischarged energy.
That is wild. So feeling anxious or overwhelmed isn't a sign that my brain is broken. It's literally just my body having more mobilized energy than it currently has an outlet for.
Exactly.
The emotion is just the heat and the noise coming off an engine that's being redlined in neutral.
It is simply a phase in a broader regulatory process, and this perfectly explains toxic productivity and experiential avoidance.
How so?
Well, when you are faced with a daunting task like writing that difficult proposal, your amygdala detects high relevance and mobilizes a massive amount of energy.
Lots of gas.
But you avoid the task. You don't write the proposal. Now you are carrying this massive excess load emotion. You have all this stranded energy. You desperately need an outlet to bleed off the pressure.
So I start alphabetizing the spice rack.
Yes.
Or I build an incredibly elaborate color-coded spreadsheet that I absolutely do not need.
Yeah.
I'm trying to trick my nervous system into discharging the stranded energy by doing a low-stakes task.
Yes, you are frantically trying to find a matched load action to absorb the excess energy. But because the new task, the spice rack, doesn't actually resolve the original trigger, the unwritten proposal, the amygdala just keeps pumping the gas.
Oh no, so it just builds and builds.
Which leads us to the fourth and final stage of the model.
Stage 4. Overload, collapse, or freeze. What happens when the system just can't take it anymore?
Well, if the activation overshoots your capacity so severely that it becomes biologically unsustainable, the nervous system acts like a circuit breaker.
Our circuit breaker.
It disengages entirely to prevent structural damage. Output is severely restricted.
What does that look like in real life?
We space out, we dissociate, or we completely shut down. We physically cannot get off the couch. It is a biological protective mechanism.
That makes so much sense of why, after a period of intense, frantic, toxic productivity,
Yeah.
after days of sleeping 4 hours and running on pure adrenaline, people often crash into this total apathy.
Exactly. The circuit breaker flipped.
The engine overheated and the car's computer just shut the whole vehicle down.
It is a total shutdown protocol. And if we look at how the mind tries to manage this excess energy before the shutdown actually happens, we can turn to psychoanalytic theory.
Okay, let's look at the psychology side of this.
We use defense mechanisms. These are unconscious processes that protect the ego from overwhelming anxiety. And the sources we're reviewing include the Defense Mechanism Rating Scale, or DMRS.
The DMRS, right, which maps these out in a very detailed way.
Yes.
Let's talk about the specific defense mechanisms, because looking at this scale is honestly like looking in a mirror. It's almost uncomfortable how accurately it describes our daily habits.
It really is.
There's one category called Level 6 defenses. Let's start there.
Level 6 defenses are classified as obsessional defenses.
Obsessional.
This includes psychological maneuvers like intellectualization and undoing. A person relying on obsessional defenses uses strict routines, lists, and a very strong need for order to maintain control and avoid uncertainty.
Wow.
They attempt to cope with internal anxiety by exerting rigid, meticulous control over their external behaviors and their environments.
This is the color-coded spreadsheet.
It is.
If my brain is overwhelmed by the chaos of my life or the anxiety of a major project, it asserts control by obsessing over the formatting of a document or, time blocking my day down to the 5-minute mark.
Exactly.
We try to control the anxiety of life by controlling our output. It is a textbook obsessional defense mechanism.
It really is. It provides a very short-term sense of mastery, but it completely hinders our capacity to actually process and adapt to the emotion itself.
Right. Because we aren't feeling it, we're just managing the environment around it.
And then there is level 3 on the DMRS, which are disavowal defenses.
Disavowal. What does that mean?
This includes denial and rationalization. This is where we subtly distance ourselves from reality to shield the ego from stress, guilt, or the realization that we are completely avoiding our lives.
And this is where the societal applause comes back in, isn't it?
Oh, entirely.
We use disavowal defenses to justify our toxic productivity. We rationalize it. We tell our friends, oh, I'd love to grab dinner, but I'm just so slammed with work, I have to grind this weekend.
Yes. We sound so responsible.
Human beings are incredibly clever. We convince ourselves we're being responsible and productive just to mask the fact that we're utterly terrified of stopping.
We use logic and reason to stabilize negative emotions, but the entire architecture is driven by the impulse to avoid.
We build a very logical house on a foundation of pure avoidance.
Beautifully said. And we can see exactly how this plays out in the real world with measurable consequences.
Let's talk about the data, because there is a fascinating empirical study from a team of psychologists, Westgate, Wormington, Olison, and Lindgren, that looked specifically at college students and these exact procrastination styles.
Yes, the Florida study. This study is basically a perfect real-world laboratory for everything we've been talking about today.
Right. They surveyed over 1,100 undergraduates. And college is basically a pressure cooker for experiential avoidance. You have high-stakes tasks, constant evaluation, and a ton of unstructured time.
A perfect storm.
So they looked at these students to see how different types of procrastination affected their academic performance and their alcohol consumption.
And the methodology here is brilliant because it reveals exactly how we trade behaviors to manage our internal state. The researchers identified different profiles of students.
Okay, let's break down the profiles.
Let's start by looking at the ones who engaged in non-academic, unproductive procrastination.
Non-academic, unproductive. This is our classic procrastination profile.
Right. The student who knows they have a chemistry final tomorrow, but they are sitting in their dorm room playing video games or scrolling social media for 6 hours.
They are substituting the adaptive task with a maladaptive one.
Exactly. And for these students, the outcomes were clear and, frankly, concerning.
I can imagine.
Academically, they had lower GPAs, which is to be expected, but the psychological toll was significant.
What did they find?
They had significantly higher alcohol-related problems. The researchers measured this using clinical scales. One looks at the negative consequences of drinking, and another assesses the risk of clinical alcohol use disorder.
And the classic procrastinators scored higher.
Yes. The classic procrastinators scored higher on both, and they report experiencing much more frequent alcohol cravings.
So because they're using maladaptive behaviors to avoid their work, they are carrying all that excess load emotion we talked about.
Right.
The guilt, the shame, the anxiety of failing. and they are trying to manage that stranded energy with alcohol.
Exactly. They are suffering academically, physically, and mentally.
But the second profile is where this study gets absolutely fascinating. What about the students doing productive procrastination?
Right. The researchers isolated a group engaging in academic productive procrastination.
What does that look like in a college dorm?
This means instead of studying for that terrifying high-stakes chemistry exam, they spent 3 hours meticulously organizing their notes for an easy English class,
Oh, wow.
or highlighting an entire textbook chapter for a class they were already getting an A in.
So they replaced the primary anxiety-inducing adaptive task with a secondary safe adaptive task within the same domain.
Yes. They were doing the level 6 obsessional defense. They were reorganizing the spice rack, but in an academic setting.
Okay, so what were their outcomes compared to the video game players?
Statistically, the academic productive procrastinators fared just as well academically as students who didn't procrastinate at all. Their GPAs were statistically indistinguishable. Yes. But even more surprisingly, they had significantly lower risks of hazardous drinking and alcohol-related problems compared to the classic procrastinators.
Wait, let me make sure I'm fully grasping the implication here.
Sure.
They were still avoiding the main task.
Yes.
They were still procrastinating.
Yes.
But because their avoidance looked like work, their psychological outcomes were entirely different.
That is the core finding. It shows us that we are constantly trading one behavior for another to manage that excess load emotion.
That is incredible.
Some trades, like organizing your notes, are clearly less physically and academically destructive than others, like hazardous drinking, but they both stem from the exact same root mechanism: experiential avoidance.
They're just different flavors of avoidance.
Exactly. And the researchers point to a phenomenon here called moral licensing.
Moral licensing, meaning because I did something that society deems good or productive, I basically give myself a psychological pass.
Yes. When you engage in a productive but non-essential task, you give yourself psychological license. You feel like you've done something responsible.
Right.
This significantly reduces the guilt and shame associated with the avoidance. It allows you to feel okay about running away from the real work.
Wow.
It is a highly effective coping strategy in the short term, which is exactly why we do it. But it is ultimately limiting because the difficult chemistry exam or the difficult conversation or the deep life reflection still hasn't been addressed.
It's a survival tactic that basically just keeps us running on a treadmill.
Yeah.
And the truly alarming thing is that we don't just see this in individual college dorms. We see this across our entire society.
Yes. If we zoom out and connect this internal psychological pattern to the macro level, we are witnessing a massive societal reckoning with this exact dynamic.
A cultural reckoning.
And it was severely accelerated by the pandemic, which acted as what sociologists call an exogenous shock.
An exogenous shock.
Yeah.
Basically an external rupture that suddenly breaks all rules of the game.
Precisely. For decades, we have been living under the spell of the neoliberal work ethic.
Right. It's this pervasive, almost religious cultural idea that we must reconcile our deepest passions with our economic output. We are told from childhood that we have to merge our very identity with our work. You know, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
But sociologists argue that this ethos is a recipe for profound systemic burnout.
Why is that?
Because when your identity is your work, your subjectivity is constantly put to work. You are no longer just selling your time or your physical labor. You are mobilizing your emotional energy, your passion, and your sense of self for economic gain.
Oh, I see.
You are living in a chronic, unending state of excess load emotion. The baseline of modern professional life is stranded energy.
Because the system is literally designed to demand more and more of that energy, regardless of your actual behavioral capacity.
Exactly.
Like if you become more efficient, you aren't given more rest, you are just given more work.
Right. The reward for good work is more work.
But as the arousal appraisal model showed us earlier, a human nervous system cannot stay in stage 3 excess load emotion indefinitely when the activation overshoots our capacity for too long.
The biological circuit breaker flips.
Stage 4, overload freeze.
And that biological freeze is exactly what we are seeing manifest culturally right now.
Yeah.
It is the root of the Great Resignation.
Wow.
It is the driving force behind the phenomenon of quiet quitting, where people actively disengage from the emotional demands of their jobs, strictly stick to their job descriptions, and refuse to go above and beyond.
Look at the sheer scale of it, too. On Reddit, the anti-work community grew to millions of users in a very, very short time.
Yes.
You have millions of people gathering online to critique the exploitative nature of modern productivity and share stories of stepping back. This isn't just a trend of lazy workers.
Yeah.
This is millions of nervous systems simultaneously hitting stage 4.
Exactly. Researchers looking at this anti-work sentiment describe workers experiencing a diffuse sense of betrayal and a constant ambient dread.
Ambient dread. That captures the feeling perfectly.
The demands of hustle culture vastly outstrip human physiological and psychological capacity. So quiet quitting is not a moral failure. It is essentially the collective nervous system saying, I am carrying too much excess load emotion. The demands are unsustainable. I must pull back and restrict my output to survive.
There are more people thinking about this than you might expect.
Mm.
It's not just a passing internet phenomenon. It is a biological imperative playing out on a global scale.
It really is.
So when you find yourself endlessly scrolling at 2 a.m., or cleaning the house at midnight instead of sleeping, or quietly disengaging from a job you used to love, you are not broken.
No.
You are not lazy. You are human.
That is perhaps the most vital reframe we can offer in this entire discussion. We have to remove the shame from the equation.
Yeah, the shame is so heavy.
Your nervous system is working exactly as it evolved to work over millions of years. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, threats were immediate and physical. A predator on the horizon, a rival tribe, a sudden physical hazard. When the brain detected these, the amygdala mobilized massive life or death energy to fuel fight, flight, or freeze.
You needed that stranded energy to physically run for your life.
Exactly. But today, our environment has completely changed. While our hardware hasn't changed at all, our threats are mostly symbolic.
Symbolic threats, like a looming deadline for a project.
Yes.
Or an unread email from your boss just sitting there in your inbox.
Right.
It's the fear of a difficult conversation with a partner, or even the subtle fear of losing social status on the internet.
Yet the brain still mobilizes that exact same life or death energy.
Yep.
The amygdala provides the massive charge, but the modern environment often strictly forbids the very physical behaviors that high mobilization is designed to support.
That's so true. You can't physically fight your boss.
No, you
You
cannot.
can't sprint out of a performance review and just run into the woods.
As much as you might want to.
So all that life or death energy gets trapped in a Zoom meeting.
Exactly.
We try to bleed it off by answering emails at 11 p.m. or reorganizing the pantry, and we call it being productive when really we are just trying to manage a biological threat response.
And when we finally understand this mechanism, when we see that it's an energy management issue and an avoidance issue, we can look at psychological frameworks that actually address the root cause rather than just treating the symptoms of busyness.
Which brings us to the therapy side of things.
Yes. This is where a framework called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, becomes incredibly relevant.
I really want to dig into ACT because it is considered a third-wave cognitive behavioral therapy. It was developed in the 1980s by Stephen C. Hayes. And what fascinates me about ACT is how radically different it is from the traditional therapies we usually hear about in popular culture.
It is a major paradigm shift. Traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, often focuses on identifying irrational or negative thoughts and trying to control, challenge, or change them.
Right, like find the bad thought and replace it with a good thought.
Exactly. It treats the difficult thought as an error that needs to be corrected. ACT takes a completely different approach based on a philosophy called functional contextualism.
Functional contextualism.
ACT assumes that the very attempt to control our thoughts and feelings is actually the root of the problem. It argues that experiential avoidance is the primary cause of our souring.
Wait, I really want to challenge this because it goes against everything we are taught. ACT questions the fundamental Western assumption of healthy normality.
It does.
We have this deeply ingrained cultural idea that human beings are naturally supposed to be happy all the time. If you aren't happy, if you are anxious or sad, the assumption is that something is wrong with you. Your brain is malfunctioning and you need to fix it immediately.
And ACT flips that entirely on its head. It posits that the normal psychological processes of the human mind are often inherently destructive.
Inherently destructive.
Well, language itself, our remarkable ability to remember the past in vivid detail, to simulate and fear the future, and to brutally judge ourselves creates suffering. Psychological suffering isn't an anomaly. It's a byproduct of a normal, highly functioning human mind.
Oh, wow. So if we accept that suffering and discomfort are just normal features of having a human brain, then our frantic attempts to avoid that suffering, like our toxic productivity, our endless list-making, our deep cleaning, are actually causing our psychological rigidity.
Exactly. We are torturing ourselves by trying to achieve an impossible state of permanent comfort.
That's profound.
It is. ACT uses a brilliant, very practical acronym to describe the core cycle of our avoidance problems. Fear. F-E-A-R.
Okay, let's break down the FEAR acronym.
F stands for fusion with your thoughts. This is when you believe your thoughts are absolute, literal truths, rather than just passing mental events.
Like believing a thought is a physical fact.
Yes. E is for evaluation of experience. This is our habit of constantly judging our internal feelings as strictly good or bad rather than just noticing them.
Okay, what's the A?
A is for avoidance of your experience. This is the experiential avoidance we've been talking about all day, running away from the bad feeling.
Right, and the R.
And R is for reason giving for your behavior. This
Mhm.
is the rationalization, the excuses we make for why we have to keep hustling and can't possibly sit still.
Let's ground this in reality. Let's
Yeah.
walk through the FEAR acronym with a really specific scenario.
Okay.
It's 10 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Mm.
You have that tight knot in your chest because you have a huge presentation tomorrow that you haven't finished.
A classic scenario.
So F, fusion. You think, if I don't make this presentation perfect, I am a total failure and I'll lose my job. You are entirely fused to that thought. You believe it as a fact.
Yes.
Evaluation. You feel the anxiety in your chest and you judge it. You say, this anxiety is bad.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. I shouldn't be feeling this.
Right. Judging the feeling itself.
Avoidance. You can't handle the dangerous anxiety, so you avoid the presentation entirely and start furiously cleaning your kitchen.
The spice rack strikes again.
Exactly. And finally, R, reason giving. You tell yourself, I can't possibly work in a messy house. I need a clean space to focus. I'm actually setting myself up for success.
That is a perfect textbook illustration of the fear cycle. You are totally trapped in a loop of avoidance. And the healthy alternative, according to the therapy, is to shift from fear to ACT. ACT.
Okay, what does ACT stand for?
A, accept your thoughts and emotions. Allow them to come and go without struggling with them or trying to push them away.
Just let them be.
C, choose a valued direction. Discover what is actually important to you in your life, beyond just the temporary relief of being busy.
And the T.
T, take action. Commit to behaviors that align with those deep values, even when it feels emotionally uncomfortable.
But getting to that acceptance requires a concept that the literature calls creative hopelessness.
Yes.
I find that term so incredibly powerful. Creative hopelessness. It's this profound moment in therapy, or just in life, where you finally realize that all your clever strategies for avoiding pain, all the late nights working, the productive procrastination, the obsessive planning, the color-coded spreadsheets, they simply do not work.
They never have.
Right. They've never permanently removed the anxiety.
It is the stark realization that the tug of war with your own mind is unwinnable. As long as you are holding the rope, you are stuck in the mud.
Wow.
Creative hopelessness is the invitation to finally drop the rope, to stop fighting the excess load emotion, to look at the anxiety and just let it be there without trying to solve it with a task.
Great, which brings us to the absolute deepest layer of this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Why is dropping the rope so hard? Why are we so terrified to just let the anxiety be there? Why do we use productivity as our primary shield?
That's the ultimate question.
I think it connects directly to how we construct our identity and our fundamental self-worth.
It absolutely does. In a society that relentlessly equates human output with human value, we harbor a deep, often unconscious fear that if we aren't doing, we have no value.
Like we're worthless if we aren't producing.
Yes, we are terrified of the inadequacy, the silence, and the loneliness that we imagine waits for us if we ever start moving. We basically believe productivity is the rent we pay to exist.
We think if we stop moving, we just disappear. But there is a powerful, growing counter-movement to this deeply ingrained fear. Tricia Hersey, the founder of an organization called the Nap Ministry, coined the phrase, rest is resistance.
It is a profound and necessary concept right now. Hersey argues that in a systemic machine that literally profits from our endless depletion, choosing to rest is not a luxury.
And what is it then?
It is a radical political act. It is how we reclaim our fundamental humanity. It is the act of refusal to let our worth be defined by a transactional metric.
The rest is not a reward you unlock only after burning yourself out. It is a fundamental requirement of having a biological body.
Exactly.
And by learning to rest, by literally sitting in the silence and allowing ourselves to feel the discomfort, the sadness, or that ambient dread without immediately trying to fix it by reorganizing a closet, we build what ACT calls psychological flexibility.
Psychological flexibility is really the ultimate goal of all of this. It is the ability to be fully present with whatever life brings and to move toward valued behavior rather than being driven entirely by avoidance.
So you don't fight the feeling.
Right. It means you can feel the heavy anxiety of a looming project, and instead of frantically organizing your desk to bleed off the energy, you can just notice the anxiety, say to yourself, there's that mobilized energy, and gently start the actual project. You don't fight the engine, you just put the car in gear.
The goal of this deep dive isn't to tell you to stop being productive. It's not about never organizing your spice rack again or never working hard.
No, not at all.
The goal is to separate our inherent worth from our daily output. It is to recognize the difference between when we are doing things to build a meaningful life and when we are doing things just to run away from ourselves.
And if we look back at the arousal appraisal model one last time, the goal is to be able to move fluidly and consciously among those biological states.
To not get stuck.
Exactly, to allow ourselves the quiet, restorative peace of low-load contemplation, to engage deeply and meaningfully in matched load action when we actually choose to work, and to gracefully accept excess load emotion without panicking, knowing that it is just physical energy looking for expression.
And crucially, not punishing ourselves when we inevitably hit overload and need to freeze or collapse for a moment. To recognize that collapse as a biological protective mechanism, not a moral failure.
Yes.
We've covered so much ground today.
Yeah.
We started by exploring how that desperate need to stay busy, to always be in motion, is often a very clever mask for avoiding our own internal experiences.
Right.
We looked at the mechanics of experiential avoidance and how our nervous system mobilizes energy that we channel into toxic productivity or productive procrastination.
We examine how society's relentless hustle culture pushes us collectively into an overload freeze, and how the true antidote isn't more doing, but the radical, quiet acceptance of our own uncomfortable feelings through psychological flexibility.
Imagine what would happen if the next time you felt that sudden, urgent urge to frantically organize or endlessly scroll or work late into the night. You just sat with the feeling. You didn't judge it. You didn't try to solve it. You just let it be there in the quiet.
You might find that the feeling isn't a threat at all. It's just energy looking for a place to rest.
If this conversation felt true for you, you're always welcome here. You can subscribe to Leone Patterns and continue with us. Same pace, same questions. See you then.